Вітаю вас, друзі. Ми в готелі «Фермонт», це центр Києва. Ми в очікуванні на міністра закордонних справ Польщі Радосława Sikorskiego. Він приїхав сюди якраз в річницю Бучанської трагедії. 31 березня 2022 року російські війська відігнали від Києва і стала відома правда, яка жахне весь світ. Сьогодні в Києві зібралися міністри закордонних справ більшості країн Євросоюзу. Всі вони вже побували в Бучі. Наша розмова відбувається вже після. Ми, звичайно, поговоримо про те, що ці 4 роки змінили в людях, які приїхали сьогодні в Україну. Це питання і до Радосława Sikorskiego.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Natalie. This is your seat, please.
All right.
Пане Радославе, насамперед я хотіла би подякувати вам і вашим людям за допомогу.
For the help you provided at the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022. And I should say that the Ukrainians will never forget about this help and everything you have done for the Ukrainians during these 4 dark years of this war. Thank you.
And we are grateful to the people of Ukraine for defending all of Europe from the aggressor. And I'm glad that I'm here on the anniversary of the liberation of Bucha, which reminds us what this war is about, namely about the right not to be invaded and not to be butchered by an enemy to whom you've done no harm.
A good word, not to be butchered. Mm-hmm. So we really are speaking on the anniversary of the tragedy in Bucha, and today European foreign ministers are in Kyiv, and I'm interested in the spirit of these politicians who were standing today in front of the church of Bucha. So what have these 4 years of war changed in those people who were today in Bucha?
Well, I think the ones who came are the ones who are your friends, who want to remind the world that just because there's another war, it doesn't mean that the Russian aggression against Ukraine is less important. On the contrary, there's a feeling among those who came that we need to strengthen our efforts because America's resources, both political and material, are engaged somewhere else. So it's going to be more of Europe's effort to help you win.
I will remind you several episodes of your life, and we started speaking about that. In 1986, perhaps, you went to Afghanistan and worked as a journalist in the Sunday Telegraph, and you worked on the side of Mujaheds.
Yep.
2 years later, the Soviet Union withdrew its troops from the Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. It was 5 years before the collapse of the Soviet Union. What does your intuition tell today? Do you feel that such turning points are approaching to us?
I don't want to
compare
to make a false prediction because before the Russian invasion, I was with a group of Ukrainian members of parliament in Munich, and I told them, look, the war is coming next week. And I told them that if Ukraine inflicts losses of 100,000 or so on Russia, then Russia would give up. And as you know, Russia has suffered much greater losses and hasn't given up. But this is the difference between today's Russia and the declining Soviet Union. So in the 1980s, the Soviet Union, from a bigger population, lost some tens of thousands. We don't exactly know how many. But there were these soldiers' mothers in the Soviet Union under Brezhnev who were tolerated. Today, Russia is much more repressive than the Soviet Union in its last decade, which is why the war is still going on.
So today their mothers are also tolerating these killings.
If they protested like they did under Brezhnev, they would immediately go to jail. Under Brezhnev there were a few dozen political prisoners. Today we think there is at least 3,000 political prisoners in Russia.
But they will not change the situation.
No, but we have a saying in Poland that the avalanche is affected by the shape of the stones over which it moves. You know, when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia in 1968, there was only something like 10 people protesting in the Red Square.
Recently, Ukrainian General Budanov was asked whether the Third World War has begun already. And he said that yes, it has begun. So how would you answer the same question? How does it feel in Poland?
Well, I've just seen Minister Budanov. We didn't discuss this particular point. But yes, a hybrid war of Russia against the West is on. Hybrid war doesn't mean nuisance on the internet. It means aggression below the threshold of kinetic attack. But even then, some parts of what the Russians are doing are kinetic. When you put explosives under, on the rails and you explode them under a moving train with the intent to derail it, which is exactly what they did in Poland, that's kinetic. When you send assassination squads to Britain, to Germany, that's kinetic. When you put flammable parcels onto airliners, that could have been kinetic, plus the cognitive warfare, plus the disinformation, plus the espionage, plus
the drones,
plus the interference in political processes. So for many years, the West was not accepting that Russia is doing aggression against it, but now I think most people see it.
I'm concerned about the condition of the European Union and its integrity and unity. Despite the fact that the Ukraine is implementing many reforms and we want to enter the European Union, so the events surrounding us, the events in Hungary, for instance, the support of your president to Orban, as well as the political movements in Slovakia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic. So everything, so they alarm me, for instance. I don't know about you, but does it seem likely that in the new global configuration, a united Europe will continue to exist?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. So, first of all, Ukraine gained the status of a candidate country thanks to its valor. Normally, it would have taken some more years. We, as you know, tried to open negotiations and they were vetoed by Hungary. The European Union is a confederation, which means that ultimate sovereignty is not with the center, is with the member states. So to get anything done, you need the agreement of member states. You also have the Commission, you also have the European Parliament, but ultimately member states can decide. And on most things, we have unanimity principle. And that means that things sometimes move very slowly and it's very frustrating. But I'll tell you, out of friendship, it is not true yet that Ukraine has passed all the laws that are needed to move the process along. And we understand the reasons. You have a war, some members of parliament have left the country, some have resigned, but laws are not being passed in the Rada as much as they should be. Yes, of course, we do understand this,
but I'm speaking not about our membership now. I'm speaking about the unity of the European Union. This is my question, and this is the point of my interest.
Well, clearly, we don't, on this issue of extending the loan to Ukraine, we don't yet have unity. And we're speaking on the day when the conversations between the foreign minister of Hungary and Sergei Lavrov have been revealed. So we understand what's going on, and this is a challenge for us. I'm even more determined after my visit here today that Europe should come through with the funds that are critically needed.
Recently, you and your colleague, Mr. Tusk, both said that your President Nawrocki's visit to Orban had harmed Poland's foreign policy. But Orban is supported by the President Trump, and the Vice President Vance is going to be in Budapest, it seems to me.
And by a GIU team in Budapest.
Yes.
That's, if it wasn't so tragic and so harmful, it would be impressive.
My question is how both of them will divide Hungary, the Americans and the Russians.
Well, we shall see very soon what the result is. It's very difficult to tell because these days there is the reality that you can see, and then there is the reality in cyberspace which you cannot see, which affects people's proclivity and voting intentions. So I'm not as trustful as I would have been 10 or 20 years ago in opinion polls. But what I do know is that Hungary, by treaty, is obliged to be loyal to the agreed policy of the European Union. And the agreed policy of the European Union is to help Ukraine resist aggression by Russia. And so I hope that after the election there'll be new decisions in Budapest, and if not, we will have to rethink our approach. We'll have to think creatively so that the European Union may not be paralyzed by a single country.
But the threat is still existing, that the
That's
European Union could be paralyzed by Orban.
It is right now on this issue. That's the nature of confederations. That's why confederations usually either transmogrify into federations or get into trouble. The United States started as a confederation of states.
Yes.
It's only with the Constitution.
And they came through the trouble.
And they had a civil war about it.
Yeah, yeah. How do you read or how do you perceive President Trump and his intentions for Europe? So does he break his relations with Europe? Does he still take Europe into consideration? Are you still partners or you are not?
Actually, Poland's relationship with the US and with President Trump are good. President Nawrocki has a good personal relationship with President Trump. And I don't have to tell you what President Trump's attitude to Europe is because he's very eloquent and he says it very clearly.
How come?
You may not like what he's saying, but it's very clear.
But perhaps Europe should do something to more 3 years under the...
To give credit where credit is due, during his first presidency, he called on us to spend more on defense. And we have doubled our spending. And in view of the war with Iran and in view of his skepticism about some of his allies, I think we need to do more, and that's exactly what we agreed.
But it seems to me that he was quite another person during his first presidency.
I don't think so.
No? No?
No, I think he's himself.
Okay, recently I spoke with the former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and asked him how do you assess whether Europe has done its part of work? Remember when the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Vance, had his speech in Munich?
I was there in the room.
Yes, he told that the Europe has to do something. So the question is, do you think that Europe has done enough to resist Putin?
Well, we've increased our defense spending. Poland, for example, spends the biggest proportion of GDP in NATO, 4.8%, more in proportion than the United States. And our military budget is now huge. It's $55 billion per annum. And we're at peace still. So I was there in the room. I hope, and we've had conversations with our American allies about different approaches, for example, to free speech. And I think we now are closer to understanding each other's cultures in this area. And I think we have persuaded, I think, the American side that, for example, child pornography and anti-Semitism and a few other things should be illegal online just as much as they are illegal in the analog world.
This is a small part of work which Europe has done, it seems to me. It seems to me that here spoke about military defense and such things.
Yeah, well, look, Poland, for example, is buying new systems. In addition to the budget that I've mentioned already, the European Union has passed a 45-year loan of 150 billion euros, and Poland is getting a third of that, to modernize not only our armies, to reindustrialize in the defense sphere, to rebuild our arms factories, to create new types of weapons, and a lot of that, Ukraine will be a major customer because you have the most up-to-date experience of creating drones, anti-drones, and of confronting a major threat to European security, which is the Russian Federation. So I see Ukraine being strong in this, not only on the battlefield, but also in economic terms.
What I wanted to ask you is, but I'm afraid a little bit, is that it seems to me that the United States are going to cut the Europe from the body of the United States or to ruin NATO.
Well, there are strains, but this is nothing new in NATO. You know, when the United States went into Vietnam, for example, it asked the United Kingdom to join that war. And at that time, the UK didn't go into Vietnam either. NATO
As this time with Iran.
But NATO survived it. You know, we've had France leaving the unified NATO command. Remember, NATO headquarters used to be in Paris. It only moved to Brussels after de Gaulle withdrew France from joint command. We've had these problems before.
So
Iraq war, you know.
Iraq the same, yes.
Yeah.
So these are constant diseases of NATO.
We are free countries. We have our public opinions. You know, there are moments when the public will give you the permission to go to war on behalf of another member state. We rallied round when the United States was attacked on 9/11. And we all sent contingents. Poland sent a brigade both to Afghanistan and to Iraq, because we recognized that was a legitimate Article 5 situation. Our ally was attacked, therefore we back up our ally.
So do you think that if Poland were in our situation, NATO would help you?
Well, we certainly hope so. That's what the treaty says, that you should treat an attack on one as an attack on everyone. It doesn't quite say you have to go to war, but we think so alliance solidarity, compatibility of political systems, cultural affinities, all these things matter. What also matters is whether you've given provocation or not. Ukraine did not give any provocation to Russia. Ukraine was a constitutionally neutral country when you were invaded, and people need to remember that.
I'm interested in your opinion as a Minister of the Foreign Affairs and former Defense Minister, by the way, on security guarantees, because they are a lot of people now speak about the security guarantees for Ukraine. What form should they take in order to be credible? And this is the question: if in Poland somebody believes in NATO's the 5th article.
Well, Ukraine already has security assurances under the Budapest Memorandum, as you know. You also have bilateral agreements with several countries, including mine, on how we can help you defend yourself better. And you're right, there are moments in history when we were given security guarantees by our allies and they were not always fulfilled. A security guarantee, as the way I use the word, is a commitment to go to war on behalf of another country when that country is attacked. And then there are security capabilities. And Ukraine needs a mixture of both. Needs guarantees that its future will be guaranteed, but it also needs to be even more capable in deterring the enemy.
What do you think about the nuclear umbrella for the common Europe, for the united Europe?
I'm skeptical.
Including Ukraine.
First of all, I'm skeptical about talking about it because
Why?
these, you know, it's not the case that the more you talk about it, the more the closer you bring it. You know, the talk about it has consequences in the minds of other leaders of other countries. So look at Iran. Iran spent 45 years trying to enrich uranium, trying to get to a nuclear weapon, with the intent of using it against Israel. And look where it's brought Iran. A huge waste of resources, and now an attack to prevent Iran from ever having nuclear weapons. So, you know, dictators like Kim Jong-un, for example, you know, like to have nuclear weapons because that assures regime survival. But the getting to nuclear weapons is very risky because others have an incentive to stop you from.
But we don't
from-
know if
from
they
doing
have
it.
the nuclear weapon.
North
Kim
Korea?
Jong-un, yeah.
Trust me, they do.
Oh, okay, they do. And what? And they exist.
Quite. But they impoverished their country and completely isolated their country. And in NATO, we have a system of nuclear sharing, and we also have the two deterrents by the UK and France, but they are quite small, and so they don't quite do the job that the American deterrent
So that
does.
means that you do not trust in nuclear umbrella?
First of all, NATO is a nuclear alliance. We do have a nuclear planning group in which I sometimes take part. And the purpose of nuclear weapons is to make the other side unsure of what you will do if they use them. Okay, so that's how deterrence works. It works at the intercontinental stage, you know, the famous logic of MAD, mutual assured destruction, and then you have the tactical level. And actually, Ukraine illustrates that nuclear weapons are much harder to use on the battlefield, both politically and militarily, than some people thought in the past.
But it is better to have it.
Well, if you could have 200 warheads just like that, of course, it would be nice. But I'm telling you again, getting to those
It is better to be safe than sorry, you see,
right.
in this case.
I mean, you had a huge arsenal when the Soviet Union collapsed. You didn't have operational control over it. And yet, you know, Ukraine's leadership at that time decided that keeping it against the international community was not worth it. You know, I'm sure there were patriots who considered all the arguments.
The new order, this is the question I'm interested in so much. Have it already...
Order or disorder?
Order. Or it will be disorder.
Quite.
So this is how the new order will look like?
Well, we've had a unique situation since World War II that even dictatorships paid lip service to international law. You know, international law is not like domestic law because there isn't a sovereign who enforces it. You know, it's more like a convention between states. But in Poland, we like to say, or at least I like to say, that international law is like the Ten Commandments. Mm-hmm. We're all sinners. You know, they get broken, but they are a useful reference point for what's good and what's bad. And so international law worked as a pressure, as an obligation, as a sort of rule of conduct. And the weakening of international law is not good for smaller countries, because the biggest ones will take care of themselves. But if you're a medium-sized country like Ukraine and Poland, or even smaller, then that increases your insecurity.
But, Pan Radosław, where we are in this process of performing a new order? What is our place now?
Well, at the moment we have the erosion of the international order, because I remind you that not that you don't know it, the Security Council of the United Nations was supposed to be the guardian of the peace.
And
It was
what?
supposed to be the body that when someone invades someone else or for no reason, the Security Council passes a resolution, we rally round, as we did in many places around the world, and we
It is paralyzed. It
and we
doesn't work.
undo the aggression, okay? And now, membership of the Security Council by Russia serves as a sort of immunity from prosecution for war crimes. And that wasn't the original idea, but I don't see how you bring it back.
And the last question. How would you assess the state of Ukrainian-Polish relations, and what do you think is jeopardizing them?
Well, between neighbors, you always have problems because there's a lot of history, not all of it good, and there are always some issues. But as you said at the beginning, Polish people rallied round. We were the first to give Ukraine tanks. We were the first to send you aircraft.
We remember that.
We were the first to receive refugees and so on. So problems are there to be solved, but we have a common interest in deterring Russian aggression.
Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
not small talk, I should say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all.